Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. This is part 2 of the Scott and Laci Peterson case. This is us going through the case detail by detail, possibly trying to figure out if Scott Peterson could be innocent. Now, if you have not seen part 1 yet, I will link it in the description box, but please watch part 1 before you watch part 2, or part 2 probably won't make much sense. I want to show you today I'm wearing my other shirt that's available in my merch store, and it's the Don't Come For Me long sleeved one, but this Don't Come For Me design, it comes in all of the styles, the short sleeve, the women's slim fit, the tank, the unisex, all of them, but check it out. So here it is. I love it. It has my glasses on it. Super cute. And last night I wore this for my birthday dinner, and then Bella was eating bread and butter and she touched me, and that is a butter smudge. Not usually on the shirt, but it is on mine because I've been wearing them nonstop. So the link to the merch store is in the description box as well. Go check it out. I think the campaign, if this goes out on Tuesday, which I'm hoping it will, I believe the campaign will be open for another 5 days. But if you don't get your shirt during this first campaign, don't worry. If it goes well and it's successful, I'll open another campaign for the same shirts. So don't stress, don't stress. Also, if you have not signed up for Audible yet and you've been looking into it and you're interested in trying it out, go ahead and use my link in the description box to sign up. It helps me out, and I think you'd really like Audible if you're not using it yet. I use Audible all the time for researching these cases. A lot of you will ask me sometimes, like, where do you get all these small details from? And typically, I get these details that I find about the people involved in these crimes. I get them from books that the family of these people write. And Sharon Rocha, who's Laci's mother, she wrote a really beautiful book about her daughter and her daughter's life. And I listened to it on Audible while I was doing my research for this case. And I got a lot of information from that book, and that's why I really love Audible. There's over 140,000 titles available. It's so easy to use. You can use it on Android, you can use it on iOS, you can listen to it on your phone, on your tablet, you can listen to it through like your Bluetooth speaker. I can just tell my Google Home right now to start playing a book and it will. It's super easy, it's super convenient. I love it. Let's get right into part 2 of the Scott and Laci Peterson case. And for anybody who did already purchase the shirts for me, I love you guys so much. It's so heartwarming to see how much support that I've gotten from you. And I just posted that video this morning, part 1, and I'm actually gonna record part 2, and then I'm gonna hop in the comments there and chat with you guys a little bit, because I don't want you to think I'm not seeing your comments, but I really wanted to get this video recorded before everybody came home. I also set an alarm on my phone so that it will go off every 15 minutes and I can get up and walk around so that my toes don't turn blue again and my legs don't fall asleep under me. When we left off at the end of part 1, the police had just discovered the existence of a woman named Amber Frey, who had been having an affair with Scott for a couple of months. And Scott had told her, even before Laci went missing, that he had lost his wife. Before the police became aware of Amber, they were looking into other avenues besides Scott. Of course, they suspected Scott. He was the husband of the woman who was missing. Usually the motive of a crime such as this would come from somebody close to the person, but they still looked into other options. Anyone in the area who had been recently paroled for violent crimes, usually against women, they were checked with, they were talked to, and that took quite a while because every one of these people was met with by the police, spoken to, and eliminated as a suspect. They brought in police sniffer dogs to try to trace Laci's path on the morning of December 24th. But the dogs kept running into the middle of the road, and the handler of the dogs, they said, well, this means that Laci did not leave on foot, but she left in a vehicle. And then another tip came in. Directly across the street from the Petersons lived the Medinas, and the Medinas had been gone for Christmas. When they got back, they realized their house had been broken into. The door had been kicked in, a safe was missing, as well as some other items from the home, so they called it in and reported it. The police immediately began to investigate that crime, and that's when they came across another neighbor of the Petersons. Diane Jackson said she was driving by the Medina home on the morning of the 24th, and she noticed something that kind of made her take a second look. She was driving pretty slowly because it was a residential area, but she saw a van parked in the driveway of the Medina home, and she saw two men standing outside. And because she was driving slowly by and she kind of turned her head to look, she noticed them because they were looking right at her, and it gave her this sketchy, kind of out of sorts feeling. She knew something wasn't right. However, she didn't really think twice about it until she heard that the house had been robbed while they were gone for Christmas. So then she called the police and reported what she saw. So obviously, if this burglary happened on the morning of Christmas Eve, this crime and Laci's disappearance could very well be involved because she went missing the morning of the 24th. Did she interrupt their burglary? Did she see them knowing that her neighbors were out of town and say like, hey, what are you guys doing here? And so they grabbed her to prevent her from telling on them or reporting their presence there to the police? If the robbery did happen the same day as she went missing, it is a possible connection that needed to be looked into. The police quickly located and picked up the men who were involved in the robbery. Stephen Todd Wayne and Donald Glenn Pierce were apprehended and questioned, and allegedly the first thing they said when they were questioned was, "We had nothing to do with that pregnant woman going missing." They also claimed they had not robbed the house on December 24th, but the day after Christmas, December 26th. Todd said he traveled that area quite often, and he noticed a house that appeared to be empty. Probably he was casing it out and saw that nobody was there. So they actually went in, they broke into the house, and they took the safe out and they put it on the front lawn while they went in to get the rest of the stuff. The police held a press conference and said these robbers, these thieves, they've been apprehended, they're in custody, and they have nothing to do with what happened to Laci Peterson. Laci Peterson was gone on the 24th, and these men were not in the vicinity of Laci Peterson's home until the 26th. So they're basically basing their entire theory that the robbers have nothing to do with Laci going missing on the fact that they were there, allegedly, 2 days after she went missing. Even though an eyewitness placed them there on the 24th, the police are still pushing this narrative that it happened on the 26th. Now, the problem with that is, as we know, by the morning of December 26th, early morning of December 26th, there was media and network vans parked out in front of the Peterson home, trying to catch a glimpse or get an interview with Scott Peterson, who was avoiding them like the plague. Ted Rollins, a reporter with KTVU, says he was in front of the home with other media outlets on December 26th at 5 a.m., and they surely would have noticed a robbery going down at the house across the street from them, especially if the robbers had taken the safe out and put it on the front lawn, like they said they had. And Ted says he was always looking for people who were gonna come out of their house because he wanted to interview them about their neighbors, the Petersons. Scott wasn't talking to them. They were sitting there literally 24 hours a day waiting for something to happen. I have a hard time believing that a robbery could have gone down right before their eyes, and they wouldn't have noticed it or tried to interview the people, even thinking they might have been neighbors. Ted Rowland says if he'd seen somebody outside, he would rush right over to try to get an interview with them. And it's hard to believe that even the most dim-witted of robbers would try to rob a house directly across the street from a media circus. In fact, since Laci went missing, there was always some sort of media presence and police presence outside of the home. So this would have had to have happened on the 24th before she went missing, because who's going to rob a house across the street from a woman that just went missing and there's police and news trucks all over the place? Nobody's going to do that. There's always somebody there who would have spotted something like this. So why are the police pushing so hard to distance the robbery of the Medina home and the disappearance of Laci Peterson? Diane Jackson, the woman who had seen the men at the Medina home on the 24th, she says the police tried to convince her she was mistaken. They said she was mixing up men in front of the Medina home with men who were working in her own yard that week. And she says they even tried to hypnotize her to convince her to change her story, which she never has, not even to this day. And to this day, the police still do stick to the story and the narrative that the robbery happened on the 26th, which I do not believe that it did. Do I believe that regular run-of-the-mill robbers would go to rob a home and then end up kidnapping and murdering a pregnant woman? Not really, but I also don't know these guys. I don't know what their past is like. I don't know how desperate they were. So it's really hard for me, not being a police officer, not having access to the backgrounds of these men, not having access to interview them and see their level of desperation or financial need at the time. It's hard for me to decipher what they were actually capable of. We're going to get back to this robbery, the men who took part in it, how Scott Peterson's lawyers might have explained their presence there and why they may have been connected to Laci, and some other things that have come out recently about these men later on in the trial portion of this case. And there's probably going to be a part 3 to this case, so I'm sorry if you're annoyed by all the parts and all the long parts, but it needs to have a part 3, I think. I just decided. It has a part 3. But now let's get back to Amber Frey and how her very existence caused Scott Peterson to forever be guilty in the court of public opinion. As soon as Laci went missing, the police set up a tip line for people to call in to the police station and give their tips. It would then be the job of the investigators to figure out which of these tips were worthy of following up on. Now, Al Brocchini just so happened to be in the area where the tip line was happening, and he was walking behind the phone operators who were taking the tips, and he heard one of the operators talking to somebody on the phone, and he caught a snippet of their conversation. He stood behind her and started listening and watching what she was typing. What she was typing was, this woman says she's Scott Peterson's girlfriend. They've been in a relationship for a couple of months. So he immediately is like, wait, give me the phone. He gets on the phone with Amber and he says, tell me everything. Amber gives her story to Al Brocchini again, and he thinks to himself, we've got Scott, right? We've got him. He's dating another woman, his wife is missing, and now we have a motive, which is something they did not have before. So he says to Amber, sit tight. Me and John Bueller, we're going to come over there and we're going to talk to you and we're going to get this all settled. Don't worry. And they go immediately to her house. Al Brocchini and John Bueller sat with Amber and she told them the entire story from the beginning when she'd met Scott to the end when she discovered who he really was. And when they heard the part about how Scott had told her on December 9th that he had lost his wife, they were like, oh, we've got him. We've got him. This is over. Now, a person from the outside might say, well, why? Why does he look guilty? He was trying to be honest with Amber. He was coming forward and trying to tell her that he had been married. He just didn't know how to tell her he still was, right? But that's not actually the case at all, because the day before December 9th, the day before, he told Amber his half-truth. Amber's friend, the one that had hooked them up, actually contacted Scott and was like, hey, I know you're married. I know what's going on, and if you don't tell her, I will. The very next day, Scott goes, buys his secret boat in cash, and then goes to his girlfriend's house and tells her a story about how he lost his wife. Brocchini and Bueller ask Amber, are you willing to start recording your phone conversations with Scott? We know it's going to be hard to not come forward and kind of confront him with what you know, but if you can just keep it on the down low and keep this relationship going, because Scott was still basically calling her every day. We would like to record these conversations so we can see if he will tell us anything to help find Laci and Connor. And Amber was afraid at first, right? Because at this point, she thought he might be a cold-blooded killer. But there was a woman and a baby missing. And she already felt bad enough for her part in the whole situation, and she wanted to do whatever she could to help. So the detectives brought her to a Radio Shack. They got a recorder that she could plug right into her phone, and it would record phone conversations with whoever called. As they're showing her how to hook this up to her phone and use it, the phone rings, and it's Scott Peterson. I'm going to play a little bit of that call for you now.
Amber. Hey. Are you there? I can barely hear you. Hey, I'll be in Paris tomorrow. I'm outside. I'm in Normandy right now, and hopefully the phone will get better. So I can't hear you right now. Are you there? Amber, okay, if you can hear me, I'll be in Paris tomorrow. I take your section. I'm not in the country in Normandy right now, so I'll call you tomorrow. I hope you hear me. I miss you. You can hear me. Bye.
Now, when this phone rang on December 30th, and Amber had to pick it up and pretend she didn't know that Scott was like a professional liar and maybe a murderer, this made her very nervous because she was not ready. She was scared and anxious. Fortunately, Amber didn't have to do too much acting at this point because the connection was bad. Amber recalls absolutely shaking when she was on that phone call. She said she knew she had to keep it up. She said she knew that if she acted differently, he would act differently, and they might lose their chance of finding where Laci and Connor were. She would have to get her acting skills polished up though, because the very next night, Scott would call her again. This is December 31st. A candlelight vigil is being held for Laci and Connor at East La Loma Park. It was attended by hundreds of people who were praying every day that Laci would be found safe. And as Laci's family and even Scott's family took the stage to thank everyone for being there to support Laci and to pray for her safe return, Scott stays hidden away in the audience.
Thank everybody for coming out here tonight. Laci would be so happy to see she had so many friends and supporters. And just keep looking for Laci. Please don't give up.
Laci's mother, Sharon, says she knew that he was there, but she did not see him the entire night.
They asked about the candlelight vigil that we held in the park. And they asked, why weren't you on that stage with the family? And frankly, because this isn't about us to be out in front of the camera. It's about us to work towards bringing home the one person who's hurting the most, the piece of our family that's missing right now.
But the media did see Scott. They saw him plenty, and they captured him on camera, smiling, socializing, and laughing, looking more like the spectator of a sports event than somebody who had lost his pregnant wife and didn't know where she was. Now, Scott's sister-in-law says the reason Scott was smiling in a couple of these pictures was because he was talking to his little niece, and she was a child, so he was smiling at her. You know, he wasn't trying to scare her and be crying and devastated in front of her, and that makes complete sense. And honestly, the fact that he was smiling in these pictures is not that suspicious to me. It looked bad when the papers printed them the next day, but it wasn't that suspicious to me because there's people around who are there supporting you and your wife. They've come there for you. So yes, you're gonna smile at them, you're gonna pat them on the back, you're gonna talk with them, and that's not super sus at all. What is suspicious though is when you get on the phone with your girlfriend during a candlelight vigil for your missing wife and son and tell her you're celebrating New Year's Eve by the Eiffel Tower.
Hello? Baby?
Yes.
Amber?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
You can?
Yeah, hey.
Oh my goodness.
I
That's,
found a quiet place. Pretty good, huh?
that's really good. Oh my god. It's like been all this crazy static and stuff. I'm like, so frustrated.
I know, I've been trying to call it. Working. Amber?
Yes?
Amber?
Oh.
Oh, stop. Amber?
I'm right here.
Amber, you there?
Yes.
Amber?
I can hear you.
Hey.
Yes.
Okay, there you go. I'm walking.
Okay, I'm like, stay still or something.
I know, I'm going to make it work.
How was your New Year's?
What's that?
How was your New Year's?
It's good. I'm just, everyone's in the bar now, so I came out of an alley. Quiet alley. Is that nice?
Yeah, it is. I can hear you. Very good.
It's pretty awesome. Fireworks and everything. The Eiffel Tower. The best of people all playing rock songs.
Uh-huh.
It's pretty funny.
Well, that's good. I'm glad you guys decided to go out. Who?
Oh, definitely.
I can never remember your friend's name. I know Jeff, but you always say, from Swans.
Swala. And then we have Pasquale, a friend of ours.
Uh-huh. Oh, he's there too?
Pasquale, yeah.
Should be?
What should my New Year's resolution be?
Oh, I don't know. That was my question. Remember?
Oh, I didn't think of that. I'll tell them something good.
Yeah, you have to tell us.
So where are you headed?
Well, I don't. Did you get my message?
No.
I
Did you leave him?
Yeah,
Wait, no.
I left you a message because I was like, oh, I hope you at least get that. But I was going to, or the San Francisco thing didn't work out. So I'm probably most likely going to go later to Sean's. Are you there? Hello?
Now, to Amber's credit, she did a very good job. I mean, it's very hard to act normal around somebody that you know is lying to you. I don't know if you've ever tried it before, but it's extremely difficult. And she did a really good job. Scott tells her he's in Paris. He's watching the fireworks by the Eiffel Tower because at this point, even though in California it wouldn't have been New Year's Eve yet, according to him in Paris it was, and he was there with friends, and he was having a good time and just trying to enjoy himself. He is literally just a compulsive liar. He's the male version of Casey Anthony, and he puts all these little details into his lies and makes this story and paints this picture for the people that he's lying to make it seem more believable. And then the call gets disconnected. He probably hung up because somebody walked up to him to say they were sorry his wife was missing. Scott calls Amber again the moment that the clock turns from 11:59 to midnight. Her time in California. As soon as 2002 turns to 2003, he is on the phone with her again, wishing her a happy new year.
You'd be calling, and I was like, I didn't want to be in the middle of that because I would not be able to hear you.
Oh, that's kind of sad that you're not jumping up and down with everyone.
Oh, it is insane. I didn't think Sean's party was going to be so insane because she's always going to be quaint. There's not going to be that many people. And they're singing karaoke, and I was like, oh my God. So, how are you?
I'm tired, but I'm happy talking to you on New Year's.
So tell me, what is your New Year's resolution?
Oh, I didn't even think of one.
You didn't think of one?
What, 9 hours later, the little week on?
You had 9 hours to think of one.
Yeah. I didn't think of one.
Nothing, huh?
What did you sing for karaoke?
Oh, there was some Louis Miguel, or what is his name? I don't know. They're just some songs. I kept telling him they weren't good, so I haven't really looked at the karaoke category, but
Yeah.
so, well, Ayana's asleep. She's with Diana tonight. My mom had to work, so I was able to, I wasn't sure if I was even going to get a Sean's tonight because my phone was all working, so, and then somebody had asked about my birthday and what I was doing, and I said I didn't know, so you'll be back by then, right? So what do you think you want to do? What do you want to do on my birthday?
Something good.
Something what?
Good.
Something good? So are we going to do the Napa Valley when you come back?
Yeah.
That'll be fun. I've never done anything like that, or been, to a place to do that. I've been, to massages, of course, but that's my extent of being pampered.
There's a lot of things we need to do together.
That would be fun. I'm looking forward to those days.
So, you got a resolution?
Yeah, I do, actually. Would you like to hear
You
it?
want to share it?
Yeah, I would like to share with you. My New Year's resolution is, and actually I thought of one for you. Which one do you want me to share first?
You give me one first.
Yours first. My New Year's resolution for you would be to not travel so much and spend more time with me and Ayana. What do you think of that? Was that something on your mind or anywhere close?
Oh yeah, it's definitely been so long, for a long time.
For a long time?
Well, it's a long, huh?
I know it hasn't been too long, but certainly.
This call lasts for about an hour, and she's trying to get him to have the "what about us, where are we going" conversation. And his voice on the phone right now in this call, it just honestly creeps me out. He sounds like such a creeper. He's all whispery and I want this to work, Amber. All creepy and gravelly, and I don't know if he's trying to be sexy or if he's with somebody in the home and he doesn't want that person to hear him, but it's just super disgusting. And what Amber knows and what the police know that Scott still does not know is that they're recording and listening to every single phone call, every single stupid, sketchy, creepy word he says. At this point, the police also have tapped Scott's phone, and they are tailing him basically everywhere he goes. On January 5th, they followed him to Berkeley Marina. He was driving a rental car, not his own car. He went to Berkeley Marina, he parked, and he walked out onto the pier and stared out at the bay for 5 minutes before he got back in his car and drove directly home. This would have been a 170-mile round-trip journey, and he did not make any stops there or back. His only purpose for getting in the car and driving 170 miles is to stand on the pier and look out at San Francisco Bay for 5 minutes. The next day, on January 6th, he gets back in the car and drives back to Berkeley Marina, where he gets out and stares at the bay for about 2 minutes before getting back in his car and driving away. But at this point, Detective Brocchini says he begins to participate in some counter-surveillance techniques, and I had to look up what counter-surveillance techniques were. It's basically where you are trying to prevent yourself from being watched or followed or under surveillance. So you take certain measures to make sure you're not being watched or followed or under surveillance. When he started going home, he was driving all crazy. Like, he would be driving very erratically, drive through parking lots, he would stop and make a quick U-turn, and the police would eventually lose him this day when he pulled his car over on the side of the highway, made a very fast and erratic U-turn, and got lost in the oncoming stream of traffic. His lawyer would later say that Scott thought the media was following him, so he was trying to lose the media. But Al Brocchini says, we were following him the whole time. We didn't see any media. We didn't see anyone else following him, so we're not sure why he would think that. That same day, January 6th, after he lost the cops at about 11 p.m., Scott Peterson called his girlfriend and confessed everything to her. Well, not everything, right? He said, I'm married still. I didn't lose my wife. Well, I did, but just recently. I'm Scott Peterson, and she's Laci Peterson, and she's been missing since Christmas Eve. He told Amber that Laci knew about the affair, knew about Amber, and she was fine with it. I'm going to go ahead and play that call for you right now.
I'll just tell you.
Okay.
You haven't been watching the news, obviously.
No.
I have not been traveling during the last couple of weeks. I've lied to you that I've been traveling.
Okay.
The girl I'm married to, her name is Laci.
Mm-hmm.
She disappeared just before Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
For the past 2 weeks, I've been in Modesto with her family and mine, searching for her.
Okay.
She just disappeared, and no one knows
Okay, now,
where she's been.
Scott.
And I can't tell you more because I need you to be protected from the media and Diana. Okay, they are amazing.
Scott,
Yeah.
are you listening?
I am.
You came to me earlier in December and told me that you had lost your wife. What was that about?
She's alive.
What?
She's alive.
Where? She's alive? Where?
In Modesto. Now, I know, this is the hardest. I wanted to tell you first, you need to protect yourself from the media.
Okay.
Okay, if you've been watching the news at all, or you haven't, the media has been telling everyone that I had something to do with her disappearance. So the past 2 weeks I've been hunted by the media, and I don't want you to be involved in this to protect yourself. I know that I've destroyed, and I hope so much that this doesn't hurt you.
How could it not affect me?
It does.
How can you possibly think that this would not affect me?
Amber, I know it does.
You never answered my question, Scott.
Sweetie, you don't, I can't say anymore.
I think I deserve.
You deserve so much better. There's no question you deserve so much better.
Yeah, and I deserve to understand an explanation of why you told me you'd lost your wife and this was the first holidays you'd spend without her. That was December 9th. You told me this, and now all of a sudden your wife's missing? Are you kidding me? Did you hear me?
I did. I don't know what to say.
I think an explanation would be a start.
I know you absolutely deserve an explanation.
Yes, I do. I do.
And I want to give you one.
I'm listening.
I can't now. I mean, you don't understand.
I don't.
You don't understand the situation.
Then why don't you fill me in on the situation and make me understand?
I can't now. I'm so sorry for that.
Why?
It's to protect all of us.
To protect all of who?
Everyone involved.
So where is she?
That's what we are trying to find out. It's a nationwide search. It's a $500,000 reward for information leading to her safe return.
Okay, so again, you never answered my question. Why did you tell me it would be the first holidays without her?
I can't. Frey, I can't explain any more now. I'm so sorry. You should be still angry at me, and I hope you are.
Yeah, isn't that what you told me before? Oh, I wish, it'd be so much easier if you just hate me and not want to talk to me. And of course, the person I am, of course I'm going to say, you told me you lost your wife. You sat there in front of me and cried and broke down. I sat there and held your hand, Scott, and comforted you. And you were lying to me. Again, you're lying to me about lying.
I lied to you about traveling, yeah.
That's among everything else. That's just an added.
Yeah.
So again, are you going... Is it that you're just not going to answer me?
I want to.
And what's stopping you? And what's stopping you from answering? Why would you tell me this on March 9th, that you have lost your wife, and I'm sorry I can't tell you until after I get back to Europe, and about this tragedy, and I asked you, are you ready for me? Oh, absolutely. This will be the first holidays without my wife. I'm going to spend them with my family in Maine. Is this not what you said?
It is.
It is? And how do you explain all of a sudden, you tell me it's a national search?
It is, yes.
How is that just not such a coincidence?
If you think I had something to do with her disappearance, it does so wrong.
Really?
Right? Yes, it is.
So how is there such a coincidence to that story from what you're telling me right now about what...
Well, no. Frey,
And you still have the audacity to call me sweetie right now. First, let's see, Dave, my friend Dave lies to me about his wife.
I know
He lied to you and tell you about this.
I know
And then you have the audacity to say, how do you handle something like this? Are you kidding me? And to put me in a position, and you want to protect me from the media? Why did you involve me in this? What role did I play? How long were you looking for me, Scott?
I'm sorry?
How long were you looking for me?
Looking for you.
Yeah. Weren't you looking for me? Isn't that what you told Sean? You were looking for me or someone like me? How is
I want to.
What? I am just such at a loss right now.
I know.
You say you can't tell me. You want to tell me in person. At what point are you going to tell me in person, Scott?
Once we find her.
What was that?
Once we find her.
Once we find her, what?
And that will be, resolution, and I will be able to explain everything to you.
When you find her...
I know you can't trust me. I know you can't trust me. I could never ask you to do that.
Okay, so...
I could never ask you, but I had...
But didn't you say, Amber, I will do anything for you to trust me? Baby, I feel we have a future together. What was that about?
I've never said anything to you that I mean.
And Amber, she comes for him, right? She says, you told me your wife was missing on December 9th. She wasn't actually missing until December 24th. Do you not see how that seems kind of strange and suspicious? And he's like, no, I didn't tell you she was missing. I told you I lost her. And she's like, yeah, you told me you lost her. You know, you lost her. What does that mean? And he's like, Amber, there's different kinds of lost, honey. There's different kinds of lost. He flat out says, if you think I had anything to do with what happened to her, you would be so wrong. And then he calls her sweetie. And Amber's like, are you serious? You have the balls to call me sweetie right now after all of this that's happening? So Amber, she released her anger on him. I don't believe this was acting. I believe this was Amber finally just letting it all out, her anger and her hurt and her sadness at what had happened with a man that she thought she had a future with. With Scott telling her something that would actually make her angry, but that she already knew, she finally had the opportunity to tell him how she felt. And she took advantage of the opportunity, and good for her. He basically says he didn't tell her because he wanted her and her daughter to be protected from the media, and he said he was going to tell her as soon as we found Laci. On January 9th, Scott takes a different rental vehicle to San Francisco Bay and Berkeley Marina again. This time he only gets out of his car briefly before staring at the bay, getting back in his car, and driving away. After this, he drove to a reservoir in Santanella, and then he checked into a hotel in Bakersfield, and he did not return home that night. Scott's lawyer would claim that 2 of these 3 Berkeley Marina visits were on days that the Modesto Bee reported the police were searching in the bay for Laci. He said Scott was there to keep an eye on the investigation because he was worried about his wife and he wanted to see if they had found her. And I say that's bullshit, because if he wanted to see if they were finding her, he would have stayed for a lot longer than 5 minutes or 2 minutes. He would have reached out to the police and said, hey, have you guys found anything? Checked in with them. The police say he never checked in with them at all. He just went there, didn't let anybody know he was going there, didn't let anybody know who was there, that he was there, stared out at the bay for a couple minutes, and then left. And Al Brocchini thinks this is him revisiting the scene of the crime. And I have to agree that that makes more sense than him checking in on the investigation to see if they found his wife. What was he doing there in reality? Was he checking up on the investigation, or was he checking to see if they'd found something and he needed to get gone? Now, from December 26th to January 3rd, both Scott's vehicle, his Ford F-150, and Laci's Land Rover were in the custody of the Modesto Police Department. During this 7 to 8 day time period, Scott would have to rent vehicles or borrow them from friends. That's why he says he was in different rental cars. Scott claims on January 3rd, when the Land Rover was returned to him, there was issues with it. There was mechanical issues. It wasn't drivable. So he would give it back to the Modesto police to do repairs on it on January 15th, and they would return it to him again on January 23rd. So from January 3rd, when he got the Land Rover back and found he couldn't drive it, to January 23rd, when the police finally returned the Land Rover to him after making repairs, he still had to rent cars at this point. He had to rent trucks because he had to work, and they still had his truck, and he couldn't use her Land Rover because it wasn't in great condition, and he had to make deliveries and things. He had to rent a Lincoln Town car at one point because his bosses came into town, and he had to drive them around and look like a businessman, and he didn't have really a vehicle at this point, so he had to rent cars and borrow them from friends. And that actually makes sense. That's fine. I mean, I don't know what kind of mechanical problems were going on with Laci's Land Rover that weren't before, that happened while it was in the custody of the police department, that you felt like you really couldn't drive it. But if that's the case, it makes sense. So the police say he was renting all these different cars to evade them, but he says that it was just out of necessity. Somehow the National Enquirer had got a hold of pictures of Scott and Amber, the ones that Amber had given the police department to prove that she was in a relationship with Scott. They had gotten a hold of these pictures, and at first, I didn't really know how. At first, I thought maybe there was a leak in the police department, and they had paid a detective or somebody to give them these pictures. Then I thought maybe one of Amber's friends had kind of turned on her, and that actually kind of ended up being what happened. Apparently, there had been pictures taken of Scott and Amber when she brought him to her company's Christmas party. And they clearly look like a couple. These are very incriminating photos. But at the time, Amber didn't think anything of it. She thought this was a real relationship. She was so sure she was going to have a future with Scott that she actually put this picture on a Christmas card and sent it out to some of her friends and family. Once she figured what Scott was and who he was, she made every effort to recover all the Christmas cards, but apparently she missed 1 or 2 because the National Enquirer paid a pretty penny to one of her friends for this Christmas card. The tabloid gave the Modesto police the heads up that they had the pictures, they were going to print them. I'm sure they did it just to kind of rub it in the faces of the police, we know something you don't know, even though the police already did know, but they were trying to keep it under wraps so that Amber could continue recording her calls with Scott. At this point, the police were like, okay, we don't want Laci and Scott's family to read about this and see these pictures in the paper, so we need to let them know what's going on now. As soon as Sharon saw the pictures of Amber and Scott, she put her head in her hands, she started crying, and she said, why did he have to kill her? This was sometime in mid-January, and on January 24th, the police decided it might be a good idea to get ahead of the Amber Frey thing. They didn't want people to think that she was a knowing participant in this extramarital affair. They wanted everybody to know she had no idea who Scott was, that he was married, that he'd been lying to her the whole time. This would protect her a little bit from the media attention, and it would also show that Scott was a liar. They held a press conference on the 24th, and everybody was excited because they thought the police were going to come up and explain what was happening with Scott and Amber. Everybody was blown away when Amber herself got up on stage and made a statement. The poor girl's clearly terrified being up there. She feels horrible. Her voice is shaking. She's racked with guilt. She's white as a sheet. But she got up there and she told her side of the story. After the press conference, a few of Laci's friends walked up to Amber and told her that they were really appreciative that she'd come forward and been honest. And Sharon, Laci's mother, asked Amber to come and meet with her at her home, tell her that it took a lot of courage to do what she did, and that she was thankful. And of course, as soon as the truth about Amber is out, Laci's parents are no longer supporting Scott.
Scott has not been forthcoming with information regarding my sister's disappearance, and I'm only left to question what else he may be hiding. Since Scott is no longer communicating with anyone in Laci's family, and because we have so many questions that he has not answered, I am no longer supporting him.
I'm sure the whole theory behind that was they had no idea that he was cheating on Laci. They never thought that he would cheat on Laci. And then they were like, well, if we didn't think he was cheating on Laci, if we never thought he could do that, what else is he capable of? And anyone in the public who had still been supporting Scott or feeling badly for him, they no longer did. They didn't see a grieving husband who lost his wife and his son any longer. They saw a cheater and a liar who had a motive now to kill his wife. Her brother Brent did reach out to him once and ask him, like, dude, can you please explain to me why I should still believe you after this? Like, why I should believe that you didn't do anything to my sister? And Scott didn't really have a good answer. He didn't even really seem too concerned with explaining to Brent or convincing him why he wasn't connected with what happened to Laci. And that breaks my heart. Here's a family who's been supporting you, who's publicly stood out and said, Scott didn't do this. This is a family that you've spent holidays with, had dinners with. Basically, it became your family, and you can't even give them the respect to act interested in proving to them that you are innocent. After the press conference, a normal person would have been done with Amber, right? But not Scott. Scott called her the day after the press conference and told her he was proud of her, that what she did was really brave, getting up there and talking to everybody. He was really impressed by it. At this time, the Modesto Police Department, they have divers in San Francisco Bay every single day looking for Laci because now they really think that she's in the bay. That is where Scott went the day of the 24th. He took a boat out. They believed he dumped her body in the bay, and that's where they were focusing their search. Now, at this time, Scott was not staying at his own home in Modesto. He was staying with his sister, his half-sister, Ann Bird. Remember the little girl that Laci Peterson had given up for adoption so many years before? Well, that little girl had been adopted when she was 6 by a wealthy family from San Diego. She grew up really happy with a loving family, close to her siblings. She had often wondered about her birth parents, but she'd never gone looking for them. Until one day, she got a call from a man who said, hey, I'm your brother. My name's Don. Now, our mother actually gave me up for adoption as well, but I found her and I've set up a meeting and you should come and meet with us. And before you knew it, Anne had met a brother that she didn't know she had, and a mother who hadn't wanted her when she was born. Anne says the meeting with Jackie was a little strained. Jackie kept it light, asking Anne trivial things about her favorite color or her favorite food, and never once did she offer an explanation for why she'd given her daughter up for adoption. Jackie did gush about her new life, though, that she had married an amazing man, that she'd given birth to a son she had decided to keep, who was the light of her life, the center of her universe. She referred to Scott as the golden child. Before Ann Bird even met Scott Peterson, she knew him as the golden child because that's what his mother called him. This was in 1997, and a few months later, Anne would meet the golden child and come to find out why he was called that. She was visiting Jackie at her home in Morro Bay, and Scott Peterson came in through the door, and Anne held the door for him, and he flashed her a dazzling smile. And she was like, oh, this makes sense now. It all makes sense. She says Scott was amazing when they first met. He seemed really happy to meet her. He hugged her. He was smiling a lot. She had been having some problems with her car, and as soon as she mentioned it, he was like, let's go out and let me take a look at it for you. He was helpful. He was kind. He was courteous, open, happy, full of joy, just exactly what she would have wanted from a brother, and she loved him. She loved him even more when she met his beautiful wife, Laci, who she described as full of energy, full of life, and a hilarious sense of humor. Anne lived in San Francisco, and Scott and Laci lived in Modesto, which was about 80 miles away, but they would still see each other often, and Anne and Laci spent a lot of time talking on the phone with each other, and they developed a close relationship all on their own, apart from Scott. Anne felt so lucky to not only have an amazing adopted family, but to find her birth family and be so accepted by a brother and his wife who she got along with and could talk to. She felt so blessed to be having so much in her life that she had to be thankful for. She said she would often look at Scott and Laci, the way they adored each other, and say, I would like what Scott and Laci have, the golden boy and his doll bride. Anne did end up meeting and marrying the man of her dreams shortly after, and Scott and Laci attended the wedding. Anne and her husband Tom would go on to have 2 children, and in November of 2002, they planned a trip to Disneyland where the whole family was invited, including Scott and Laci, who was 7 months pregnant at the time. Just before the trip, Anne got a call from Laci Peterson, who said, I'm definitely going to Disneyland, but I don't know if Scott and Laci are going to. They're having some problems again. Anne, who was unaware that Laci and Scott had ever had any issues in their marriage, said, what kind of problems? And Laci responded with a sigh, I don't know. You know, just men. Just men. According to Anne, there seemed to be a little tension in Laci and Laci's relationship that went beyond the normal mother-in-law and daughter-in-law kind of dynamic. Anne says that Laci resented the fact that Scott and Laci had moved to Modesto to be closer to her family, but further away from his. Laci blamed Laci for this decision because her family was there and it was her idea, and she placed Scott on a pedestal. She thought no one would ever be good enough for her baby boy, and I get that. I have a 7-year-old son who I always tell him no one will ever love you more than I do. But there's a point when your son is not 7 anymore, when he's 30 and he's married to a lovely woman and they're having their first child together, where you need to cut the cord, lady. You need to cut the cord. Laci thought Laci was too controlling and too much of a perfectionist, and this reminds me so much of Shanann and Chris Watts, because that's exactly how Chris Watts' mother described Shanann, that she was so controlling, that she always had to have the last say in everything, how they decorated the house, what they did, what the kids wore, things like that. And it just shows like a huge resentment there on the mother's part towards the daughter-in-law. The difference is, I think that Shanann's mother-in-law, Chris's mother, hated Shanann. You can tell when they're interviewed, even the father, after Shanann's death is discovered. They talk about her in such a horrendous, disrespectful way. Like they just don't like her. They really didn't like her. And I don't think that Laci Peterson really hated Laci or disliked Laci. I think she was just jealous of Scott's attention being turned away from his mother and her family to Laci and their new family. And you can kind of see an example of this jealousy when Lee and Laci went on Barbara Walters in July of 2004 and gave an interview about their son. They're asked what kind of relationship Laci and Scott had, and Laci says it was good. They always backed each other up. It was like we were all outsiders, and they were the only ones that mattered. They were totally dedicated to each other. Now she's trying to make this seem as if it's a good thing, like Scott wouldn't have done this, but what it sounds like to me more is she may have been a little salty about the fact that she was his mother, she'd raised him, she loved him, she put him on a pedestal his whole life, and then he meets this woman and all of a sudden no one else exists besides him and her. Anyways, Laci and Scott did end up going on this trip to Disneyland, and Laci was her normal happy self, even 7.5 months pregnant, walking through a theme park. But Scott was not the same happy-go-lucky, joyful guy that Anne Bird had met in 1997. She said he was quiet, he was moody, he was detached from everybody. He spent a lot of time in his hotel room on the phone. Even when he was around everybody, he was on his phone. She just assumed maybe something was wrong. The couple was having a fight, they weren't getting along. But now we know that in November of 2002, Scott was talking every day on the phone with his girlfriend Amber, and so that's what he was doing at that point. He's at Disneyland with his family and his wife, who's pregnant, and he's on the phone every day with his girlfriend. Anne was also present on December 10th, 2002 at Laci's baby shower. Once again, she said Scott sat there and kind of just looked sullen and like he didn't want to be there the whole time, which makes sense because men usually don't want to be at baby showers. She kept going up to him and saying, "Aren't you excited?" And he was just kind of like, "Yeah, so excited, woo." Well, once again, we know more now than Ann Bird did at that time. And we know that the past couple of days for Scott had been filled with Amber's friend finding out that Scott was married, confronting Scott about it, giving him an ultimatum. Then Scott had to go and buy a boat. And then Scott had to go and talk to Amber in person about how he lied to her. He was married, but he'd lost his wife. And that happened on December 9th, the day before Laci's baby shower. Anne did begin to think this personality change was strange. Every time she'd seen Scott before, he'd been the life of the party, the center of the attention, the guy who was just trying to make everyone smile, getting everybody drinks, just socializing. And now he was this sullen, detached, and distracted individual who didn't seem too happy about the upcoming birth of his new child. After Laci turned up missing, even with the drastic shift in her brother's personality, Anne never for a second thought that he was guilty. She lived pretty close to Burglary, Marina, because she lived in San Francisco, and a few days after Laci had gone missing, Laci Peterson called Anne and said, "Hey, we're trying to verify Scott's alibi that day because we're afraid people are going to think he wasn't there. So can you go to Burglary, Marina and just talk to people and see if they saw him that day?" And Anne did. She went to Burglary, Marina and showed his picture around to see if anybody, had spotted him that day. But what's the most outstanding to me is that Laci Peterson, a couple days after her daughter-in-law and her grandson have vanished without a trace, without any, explanation, she's concerned with solidifying her son's alibi. Through the first week of Laci being gone, Anne was just glued to any news that she could find or hear about Laci being missing and what was going on with her. And she would often talk to Scott and call him and say, "Hey, any news, anything going on?" She noticed that every time she talked to him, he just seemed so deadpan, so unemotional, not agitated at all. And she thought that this was just because he was in shock. On January 12th, Laci is still missing, and Anne's youngest son, Tommy, is being christened. She invites Scott and her whole family to the church, and he comes, but she noticed that there was a guy sitting a couple pews behind him who was watching him intently, and she thinks that that was an undercover police officer because we know Scott was being trailed at this time, and Scott noticed him as well. Anne arranged a private meeting with the rector of the church after the christening ceremony. She figured that with Laci being missing, the family might need some spiritual and emotional help to just talk it out and be there for each other and pray. While the rector was talking, Scott was holding Tommy, the baby who had just been christened, and at one point Anne looked over and saw that he was staring down at Tommy and crying. She remembers thinking this was very odd because Scott had publicly and privately shown very little emotion about his wife and son being gone. But here he was publicly shedding tears while he was holding this little baby. She looks back now and says she thinks they were fake tears. They were just there for show, for the undercover police officer who was watching, for the rector, for the family. Why would he cry now when he had never cried before? But I have to at least wonder a little bit if maybe holding that baby in his arms kind of brought him back to what he might have done to his own baby. Maybe holding that baby just made him realize that he was never going to hold his own son, Connor, and maybe the emotion did hit him for a minute there. Maybe I'm giving him too much credit. I don't know. I probably am, because that very same day, he would leave the church and go home and upgrade his cable plan to include 2 hardcore porn channels, not the Skinamax stuff. He would then also call his girlfriend Amber. Now, Scott had not been getting a warm welcome in Modesto at this point. He had people literally standing outside of his house yelling "murderer," and he was basically living in his car, I guess. Laci Peterson called Anne and gave her the sob story about how everybody was being so mean to Scott. He was living out of his car, and Anne felt compelled to invite Scott to come and stay with her in San Francisco, with her and her husband and her family. And I kind of have to feel like that was Jackie's whole intention to begin with, to call Anne and be like, "Oh, your poor brother, he's homeless, he has no place to live." Hint, hint. So Anne let Scott come and live with her. And the very first night that he came to stay with her and her family, she, her husband Tom, and Scott were having dinner, and they had a couple of bottles of wine because she thought he probably needed it. Scott avoided the topic of Laci, never even bringing up her name, acted like a normal guy. In fact, Anne said it seemed like he was having fun, and that's when her husband Tom started to have his doubts. He would tell his wife Anne later in private, "I just thought Scott would be more screwed up about this." And Anne said in defense of her brother, he's just making an effort to be sociable. And Tom replied, didn't seem like much of an effort. Anne also began to notice some odd things about her brother. He actually stayed in a loft bedroom that overlooked San Francisco Bay, and he seemed obsessed with staring down at the bay, at the search that was going on for his wife, and getting angry about it. He would start pacing around and yelling, why are they looking there? They're looking in the wrong place. They're wasting their time. Why are they doing this? Anne would try to ask Scott, well, where do you think she is? Or what do you think happened to her? Do you know anybody who could have wanted to hurt her? And Scott did not seem interested at all in speculating about what could have happened to Laci. In fact, when he wasn't raging about how the cops were searching for his wife, he was hitting on Anne's young babysitter. Anne said he would openly flirt with this young girl as if he was a single man. When the existence of Amber Frey came out on the 24th, Anne directly asked her brother, were you having an affair? And he said yes. And she said, did Laci know? And he said yes. And Anne didn't believe him. This was a woman who was married. This was a woman who had been pregnant and had children. She couldn't understand how a woman who was 8 months pregnant would hear her husband was having an affair and be okay with it. And Anne knew Laci. She knew Laci's personality, and she knew Laci would have had a problem with it. So she couldn't really ignore any longer the glaringly obvious signs that something was wrong with her brother in the whole situation. Anne's husband, Tom, said he's got to go. He's got to get out of here. But Anne still felt bad for him. And Anne still didn't really believe that he could have done this. So she gave Scott the key to a cabin that her family owned so he could stay there and kind of hide out. And she's got Laci Peterson in her ear every day, like, he didn't do this, he's innocent. Jackie actually said, just because he had an affair doesn't mean he's a murderer. I mean, yeah, Jackie, it doesn't, but it also doesn't mean that he's a good person. It also doesn't mean that he's not a murderer. It also makes him the only person who has the potential motive to hurt Laci Peterson. In fact, both Lee and Laci Peterson were very blasé about their son's affair. Very disgustingly blasé about their son's affair. In the Barbara Walters interview, Lee Peterson says it was surprising, it was disappointing, but it certainly isn't something that's extraordinary. People do this all the time. I mean, that's the reality of life. Men cheat, women cheat. And then Barbara Walters says when their wives are 8.5 months pregnant, and both at the same time, Lee and Jackie say different things. Lee says even more so. And Jackie says, that's when they do it the most. We've just discovered this. I'm going to try and play this clip, but I'm explaining it in case I get a copyright strike and I have to take the clip out, so at least you know what happened. But I want you to see for yourself the disgusting display of enabling that his parents do. And understand, this is how this child, Scott, he was raised like this. He was raised to be a narcissist. And that's what it is, right? Enabling, making excuses, letting him know that he doesn't have to be accountable for the things that he's done. You could have gotten up there and said it was absolutely disgusting and deplorable that our son cheated on his wife. We do not support it. This is not okay. This is not how he was raised. And then gone on to say, but it doesn't make him a murderer. It doesn't mean he murdered her. But to get up there and say, this happens every single day. It's normal. You're normalizing the fact that people cheat on each other. You're normalizing the fact that your son had an affair on his pregnant wife. It does not make him a murderer, yes, but it does make him a shitty person, and you should have said that. And then to say, oh yeah, even more so when the wives are pregnant. Yes. And Jackie's sitting over there like, yes, we've done our research. That's apparently when it happens the most. Like, come on. Oh, come on. Stop making excuses for your son. Science says this is actually quite common. Like, stop trying to normalize a hideous thing that happened to your daughter-in-law who's gone, and as a result, your grandson's gone.
Did you have any idea that your son was seeing another woman?
No.
So when you heard that he was seeing another woman, what did you think? What do you think now?
Well, it was surprising. It was disappointing. But, I mean, that's the reality of life. Men have affairs. Women have affairs.
When their wives are 8.5 months pregnant?
Probably more so.
That's mostly when men do, we've learned. I had no idea.
So is it your feeling that Scott needed another woman for, I don't know, sex or what? What do you think?
It wasn't anything that meant anything to Scott. He was just being a young man feeling his oats. No different from 95% of the men in this country.
Really?
There's no
That
excuse
happens.
for it.
It
just happened.
certainly doesn't give motive for murder.
On January 28th, Scott gives an interview with Diane Sawyer. This was one of his first and only interviews he would ever do. The interview would prove to be a big mistake on his part. First of all, he's asked, "Did you kill your wife?" And he answers with this weird smile. Like the whole time he's answering, he's smiling. He's like, no. Silly.
I think everybody sitting at home wants the answer to the same question. Did you murder your wife?
No, I did not. And I had absolutely nothing to do with her disappearance.
And then he proceeds to smile the entire time he's answering. While he's talking about his wife being murdered being a possibility, he's smiling and smirking.
You use the word murder. And right now, everyone's looking for a body. And that is the hardest thing, because that is not a possible resolution for us. And you use the word murder, and yeah, I mean, that is a possibility. It's not one we're ready to accept, and it creeps in my mind late at night and early in the morning. And during the day, all we can think about is the right resolution is to find her. Well,
Did you ever hit her? Did you ever injure her?
no, my God, no. Violence towards women is unapproachable. It is the most disgusting act to me.
And then the conversation moves to Amber, and Diane says, "Did you love her, Scott?" And Scott's like, no. I respected her. Yeah, I definitely respected her. You know, what she did going in that press conference and speaking her truth, that was so brave. I respect her. But no, I didn't love her.
Were you in love with her?
No. I'd have to say that I respect her. And as I imagine everyone does after seeing her come out and do the press conference, an amazing character she has.
Was this the first time?
Which is so insulting to Amber. I mean, I know that that's not the point, but he's calling Amber every day still, telling her he loves her. Well, he never said he loved her, so he never actually told Amber he loved her. But he's still calling her every day, trying to maintain a relationship with her. And why? If you don't love her, why? Then he catches himself up when he said, "I know our relationship is wrong." I mean, was wrong. So he knows in his head he's still having this relationship with Amber. He knows in his head it's still going on. But everybody else thinks it's over. Nobody else knows they're talking, besides the police who are listening to the phone calls. But nobody else knows. So he actually referred to his relationship with Amber in the present tense, which is kind of funny considering he would go on to refer to his wife Laci in the past tense when he said Laci was an amazing person. I mean, is an amazing person. And this interview just made him look even worse than he already did. Way worse than he already did. I think another reason why Scott avoided being in front of the cameras for so long was, one, because he didn't want Amber to find out. But two, because he was trying to avoid the mistake that Chris Watts made the very same day that Shanann, Bella, and Celeste were missing. Chris Watts got right up in front of the cameras and started talking about his family. And everybody, including myself, could tell right from the get-go that he was hiding something and he was a sketchy person. And I think Scott was like, I don't know if I trust myself, my body language, my mannerisms to not betray my guilt. So I don't want to go in front of the cameras. And that's exactly what happened when he went in front of the cameras with Diane Sawyer. He betrayed himself. Another mistake that Scott made that Chris Watts would make so many years later was also referring to his wife in the past tense. And that's what Chris Watts did when he was talking about his daughter Bella. And he said Bella was going to start school next week. Not Bella is going to start school next week. It's a sign that you already know that this person is gone. And at this point, Laci and Connor had not been discovered dead yet. He also lies and says that he told the police about his relationship with Amber the very first night they interviewed him on the 24th. And that never happened. He never, ever told the police about his relationship with Amber.
It should have been brought forth by me immediately, the romantic relationship.
Had you told anyone? Did you tell police?
Told the police immediately.
When?
That was the first night we were together. The police, I spent with the police.
You told them about her?
Yeah, from December 24th on.
He also says that he told Laci about his relationship with Amber, so he's keeping the story going, that Laci knew everything.
Did your wife find out about it?
I told my wife.
When?
In early December.
Did it cause a rupture in the marriage?
It was not a positive, obviously. It's inappropriate. But it was not something that we weren't dealing with.
Diane Sawyer says, well, did it cause a rupture in the marriage? And Scott says it wasn't a positive, obviously, but, it's something we were dealing with. Diane Sawyer says, so there was a lot of arguing. And he's like, no.
A lot of arguing?
No. I can't say that even, she was okay with the idea. But it wasn't anything that would break us apart.
There wasn't a lot of anger?
No.
I wouldn't say she was okay with the idea, but it wasn't something that was going to break us up. And then Diane Sawyer comes out like the badass boss lady that she is. And she's like, you really expect me or anybody that's listening to this to believe that your wife, who was 8.5 months pregnant, knew you were having an affair? And she was just like, okay. And he was like, well, you guys don't know our relationship. You don't know how we were together.
Do you really expect people to believe that an 8.5-month pregnant woman learns her husband has had an affair and is saintly and casual about it? Accommodating? Makes a peace with it?
Well, you don't know. No one knows our relationship but us.
On January 29th, Scott traded in Laci's Land Rover for a Dodge Durango. Everyone went crazy. They could not imagine another reason why he would sell his wife's car unless he knew she was never coming back. Now, once again, he claims the Land Rover was having some functionality issues, that it was having some mechanical problems, and he couldn't use it for work. He needed a truck for work, and the police still had his Ford F-150 in custody. So he basically didn't really have anything he could use for work. So that's why he traded it in for a truck, because he still had to work to pay the bills, to pay the car payments, to pay the house payments, and to survive. I do actually understand this. If he actually did need a truck for work, which he did sell agricultural stuff like manure, and he might have had to make deliveries at times. If he did need a truck for work, Laci's Land Rover wouldn't have worked for that, and he would have needed a vehicle. I think it's cold and callous, but I don't think it states that he killed his wife. The calls with Amber would continue until February 19th, with the most notable one, in my opinion, being February 10th. February 10th was Connor's due date. This was the day that Connor should have been born. Everybody was just really sad about it because it signified that time was running out. Scott got up in front of the cameras that day and he said, everybody's got to check hospitals and birthing centers. My son and my wife might be out there and we need to find them. But behind the scenes, he's calling Amber on February 10th because February 10th, while it was Connor's due date, was also Amber Frey's birthday. And he called her and told her to go out in the bushes outside of the place where her friends were throwing her a birthday party. She went out to the bushes and found a birthday gift from him, a silver box with an amber necklace, a Nora Jones CD, Come Away With Me, and a bundle of wildflowers. And this is so disgusting to me because this is the day your son should have been born. This day to me would be the most soul-shaking because now you're wondering, was he already born? Did my wife have to give birth in captivity? Are they okay? Are they dead? Even though February 9th wasn't any different than February 10th, February 10th held an important landmark in the search, which showed that you may not be looking for a missing pregnant woman. You may be looking for a missing woman and a newborn. On February 19th, Amber calls Scott and says, considering all this happened, in light of everything that's gone down, I really think it's a good idea if you and I stop talking until everything's sorted out. And before she can even get the sentence out, he's like, I agree. Yes, I agree. I concur. And she's like, oh, well, that was easier than I expected. He's like, yeah, it's the right thing. It's the right thing. So this idiot's trying to make it seem like it's his idea. He's already been thinking about this. He's so glad that she suggested it, right? This is the kind of narcissistic bullshit that is like, I'm going to reject you before you have a chance to reject me. You're not breaking up with me. This is a mutual breakup. Even though he was the one calling her every day and leaving her necklaces and CDs in the bushes, he was thinking about this the whole time. Don't worry, I'm not hurt. I'm not bothered. Bye. We are going to end part 2 here. Part 3 will be up within the next couple of days, I hope. And it's going to consist of finding Laci and Connor, of Scott being taken into custody, and his trial and the aftermath, which would be his appeal. Thank you guys so much for being here. Once again, the link to my merch store is in the description box. If you want to grab one of your shirts, that would be so cool. And make sure if you do get one and you're wearing it, tag me on social media so I can see. Once again, I've sat here too long and my left foot is completely asleep. Oh my God, it's so painful. Sorry, but I'm just really compelled to sing Norah Jones now. Come away with me and we'll kiss on a mountaintop. Come away with me and I'll never stop loving you. And I wanna wake up with the rain falling on a tin roof while I'm safe there in your arms. So all I ask is for you to come away with me in the night. Come away with me. That was a great song, and I have not heard it in so long. So I guess I should say thank you, Scott Peterson, for bringing it back to my memory so I can add it to my Spotify playlist. All right, guys, have a wonderful day. Stay kind and stay beautiful. Mwah. Bye.
She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind